The Iranians are sending a direct threat against the life of President Donald Trump's son, Barron Trump. Under the radar, the United States military is succeeding in opening the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran's economy is collapsing. 2 million rials for $1. This is the new economic low reached by the Islamic Republic. The U.S. Treasury Secretary has announced at first light the economic D-Day against Iran will begin. Iran is signaling to the United States not one drop of oil will leave the Gulf if the economic war continues. The Iranian body that oversees Gulf shipping lanes is threatening to seize and sink ships in the Strait of Hormuz if they pass without its approval. So is the Iranian regime facing a survival crisis? The Revolutionary Guards are censoring the remarks of Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian after he admitted that Iran is collapsing economically. But the Revolutionary Guards do not care. A few hours later, they sent a threat to the world announcing that any country or organization that cooperates with American sanctions will be dealt with brutally and destroyed. And in Israel, officials are identifying a new Iranian network trying to increase the scale of smuggling to the Hezbollah terror organization and to rescue Revolutionary Guards commanders trapped inside the underground system fortified by the IDF in southern Lebanon. The IDF can decide the battle on the Ali Taher Ridge. Now today, we'll explain why the army is not in a rush. I'm Shoshani, joined by Ashlea. We are boots on the ground. We bring you the truth about what's happening in Israel and the entire truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is August 24th. Let's get started. We begin with what is happening on the ground in the Strait of Hormuz. After a period of near total silence about the situation in the Strait, and after you were given only scattered pieces of information that reached us, we can now say with confidence, without much noise or fanfare, the American Navy is succeeding in neutralizing Iran's chokehold on the Strait. Naval escorts, air defense systems, and previous strikes have succeeded in opening a route for dozens of ships every day. And while President Trump keeps the world busy with bombastic statements about Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, the American Navy and Central Command, CENTCOM, are moving millions of barrels of oil every night through the critical strait, right under Iran's nose. Naval vessels operating in the Persian Gulf have opened a route that keeps the global energy market relatively stable, while the Iranian economy is being suffocated. According to officials in the Pentagon and United States Central Command, since the strikes on Iran stopped and the campaign shifted towards economic warfare, the U.S. Navy has built capabilities that allow millions of barrels of oil to move out every night beyond Iran's reach. Now, according to senior officials, 40 loaded oil tankers passed through the deep-water southern route of the Strait of Hormuz during the night between Friday and Saturday. The route, close to the coast of Oman, has become the center of the American strategy against Iran. Many of the strikes carried out by the Americans weeks ago were designed to make this route possible. Now, according to reports, the United States is managing to move between 10 and 15 million barrels of oil out of the Gulf almost every night, with no real Iranian ability to interfere. This is possible because of a set of capabilities built by the American side in recent weeks. Now, while many capabilities were taken away from the regime in Tehran, at the same time, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bassett announced overnight between Sunday and Monday that the United States is entering the final stage of the economic campaign against Iran, ahead of sweeping sanctions that Washington plans to impose on Tehran. The announcement comes against the background and the backdrop of ongoing tension between the two countries. Bassett made clear that Washington is about to activate what he called the economic D-Day, a financial offensive on unprecedented scale. We're now entering the final stage. At first light, economic D-Day will begin, the largest financial attack ever launched against the adversary, said Secretary Bassett. The ongoing American economic sanctions and President Trump's latest announcements of the economic D-Day against Iran, continue to strike the Iranian economy without mercy. Just this morning, another negative record was set in the opening of markets, as the local currency crossed the threshold of 2 million rials to $1. For ordinary Iranians, crossing the 2 million rial threshold is not just a statistic, it's a devastating blow to their purchasing power. The immediate meaning of the currency collapse is a sharp rise in inflation, a dramatic increase in the cost of basic food products, medicine, and electrical goods, and the transformation of the real into paper with almost no value. Now, for years, Iran's leadership boasted of its ability to survive under sanctions, bypass the economic blockade, and run the country even under heavy international pressure. But in recent weeks, the tone in Tehran has begun to change. Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, President Masoud Pezeshkian, and other senior economic officials are all issuing growing warnings about the condition of Iran's economy. These are no longer general statements about difficulties or attempts to explain to the public why sanctions are hurting the economy. The new message is clear and sharp. The war and the economic pressure are beginning to penetrate the heart of Iranian society and leadership, and the regime is worried about the consequences. Senior security officials say the main question is not only whether Iran is about to collapse, but whether a buildup of pressure has, for the first time, begun to threaten the ability of the fanatical Islamist regime to conduct a long war and preserve international and internal stability. And amidst all of this, the regime in Tehran appears lost. After issuing threats against President Trump, his wife, and countries that cooperate with him, Iran is now turning to an especially severe threat, a threat against the life of the president's youngest son, Barron Trump. Iranian state television aired a segment presenting messages perceived as a direct threat against Barron Trump, alongside a reference to a $10 million reward. The broadcast came after previous Iranian threats against Trump and other senior officials. In the 3-minute segment, Iranian television presented a threatening propaganda frame around the son of the President of the United States, portraying him as a pressure point against the presidential family. The message was clear. Tehran is trying to make the war against Trump personal. And on another front, Iran has succeeded for the first time in shutting down a power plant in Britain. An unusual cyber attack by hackers identified with the regime in Tehran brought a power plant to halt for 4 days. The attack is considered Iran's most successful cyber operation so far against the kingdom. And experts assess that it was mainly intended as a demonstration of capability. Because of the war in the Middle East, Qatar, one of the richest countries in the world, is also being forced to make unusual budget cuts in the government spending and in the aid it provides to countries and organizations outside of the country, following the heavy economic damage it suffered during the war with Iran. And now we turn to Lebanon. The way the battle ends above ground, and especially underground on the Ali Taher Ridge, will have a decisive impact on the outcome of the Third Lebanon War, and especially on the chances of disarming Hezbollah. That's why all the many actors involved in the fighting, and especially in the intense diplomatic contacts taking place under the radar to end this confrontation, are keeping the lowest possible media profile and releasing information very carefully. Hezbollah and the Iranians are afraid that media reports will damage their chances of reaching, through mediators, an arrangement that would allow their people to escape safely and with minimal humiliation from the underground trap in which they are stuck. But what makes this confrontation so explosive is the fact that in addition to several dozen Hezbollah fighters and senior commanders, according to El Arabiya, several dozen Iranian advisors, quote unquote, are also staying beneath the rocks of the Ali Taher Ridge. Now, most of these are officers in the Revolutionary Guards who arrived over the past year at Hezbollah's underground command center for the combat zone north of the Litani River in order to help the organization. And in the Gaza Strip, the Hamas terror organization continues trying to lie to everyone and avoid disarming. Kushner threatened Hamas and said explicitly, if Hamas cheats, no one will be stopping Israel. American intelligence received clear information that Hamas is planning to cheat and avoid disarming. Imagine that. That is why the envoy of the President of the United States, Jared Kushner, explicitly warned Khalil al-Haya, the leader of the terror organization. So as you can see, there's a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. I'm Shoshani. I'm joined by Ashlea Alex, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the truth about what's happening in Israel and about the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. But before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click the subscribe button. And most importantly, don't forget to find me, Mati Shoshani, and Yair Pinto on social media to get our firsthand perspective on what it's like to live in Israel under war. Now, for generations, Israel's paratroopers have stood on the front lines, defending the people of Israel, the land of Israel, and the home God promised to his people. And even now, as the war continues, Israel's paratroopers are still fighting on multiple fronts. They leave behind wives, children, and families and step forward to protect the nation. Every paratrooper needs to know one thing, that if the worst should happen, his wife and children will not be left alone. That's why the Paratroopers Families Fund exists, known in Hebrew as Abba's Friends, Dad's Friends. For more than 50 years, this fund has provided long-term ongoing support for the widows and orphans of fallen paratroopers. Not one-time help, but a standing commitment. Each family is assigned a personal liaison from the brigade. Widows and children take part in the retreats, the trips, and activities throughout the year. And children are guided from childhood into their own military service, and even beyond. This is not a memorial organization. It's an organization of life, responsibility, love, and continued care for those left behind. And your help is needed now. Everyone who serves in this fund is a volunteer. Not a single person draws a salary. Your donation helps continue real, personal support for a child who lost his father and for a widow carrying the home alone. This is a practical way to stand with Israel, to stand with her soldiers, and to stand with the widows and orphans of those who gave their lives for this land. Donate now to the Paratroopers Families Fund at idfairborne.org. Again, that's idfairborne.org. Help the fund continue giving these widows and children community, comfort, hope, and support, not just today, but for years to come. Let's get back to the news. American warships are now escorting tankers through the southern Strait of Hormuz after months of Iranian attacks, mining threats, and pressure on commercial shipping. Traffic is still below pre-war levels, but the physical picture has changed. More ships are moving, more oil is getting through, and Iran is finding it harder to locate and attack the convoys. So how did CENTCOM turn a maritime choke point Iran could intimidate into a corridor shipping companies were willing to enter again? Iran never needed to sink every tanker. A few successful attacks could drive up insurance costs, frighten crews, and keep shipping companies far away. The American answer was to attack the targeting chain that allowed Iran to find moving ships. Large coastal radars were hit first. Iran responded with cheaper truck-mounted radars that could emerge from cover, scan the shipping lanes, and disappear. But the moment a radar transmits, American electronic sensors can detect its energy and give aircraft carrying anti-radiation missiles a chance to strike the source. Iran also used passive electro-optical cameras and infrared sensors on elevated terrain in Hormuzgan and on islands around the strait. Those systems are harder to find because they don't broadcast radio energy. U.S. aircraft and intelligence platforms began hunting those observation points while continuing to attack mobile emitters whenever they appeared. The next problem was mines and fast boats. Unmanned vessels and mine-clearing assets searched for the southern corridor, while the Fifth Fleet organized escorted traffic closer to the Omani side. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers with Aegis and Standard missile interceptors form the backbone of these escorts. Drones and Apache helicopters watch from above, and the Apaches can use APKWS laser-guided rockets against smaller aerial threats. Many convoys move at night with AIS transmitted, switched off. That reduces public trafficking and tracking data and makes it harder for Iran to build a clean picture for civilian sources. Commercial tracking recently showed 192 ships crossing in a single week, compared with only about 42 weeks earlier. The recovery is real, even if the strait is still far from normal. The military campaign also needed shipping companies to come back. Washington offered financial guarantees and helped cover the higher insurance cost of escorted voyages. And as successful crossings accumulated, more captains and operators accepted the route. More than 8 million barrels of oil are now moving through Hormuz on an average day, with bypass pipelines and other regional routes included. Gulf flows are estimated at roughly 10 to 13 million barrels daily, still below the roughly 21 million that crossed Hormuz before the war. Iran has not lost every weapon in the strait. What it's losing is the ability to keep commercial shipping away through fear alone. And Tehran is adapting. The Persian Gulf Waterway Authority has published a blacklist of ships it says violated Iranian traffic rules. It warns of fines, detention, and confiscation on future passages. Now, the threat can even extend to vessels cooperating with blacklisted ships through cargo transfers or intermediate ports. That is a different kind of pressure. If Iran cannot reliably stop a protected convoy at sea, it can try to frighten owners and charters with the possibility of seizure later on. Mohsen Rezai has gone further than that, warning that if American economic campaign continues, Iran will try to stop oil from leaving the Persian Gulf. American escorts are now testing whether Tehran can still enforce that threat. Now, before we continue, help us share the truth from Israel. Like this report, share it, and subscribe to Boots on the Ground so you don't miss the next change in this rapidly developing war. Because what you see on YouTube is only part of the story. If you want to get closer to our first-hand reporting, behind-the-scenes moments, and stories of faith, resilience, and hope from Israel, visit tbn.org/journeys/boots. You can also text the word boots to 316-316 to receive direct updates from TBN Israel. Now, when I and Ashlea report from Israel, you're not only watching events from a distance, you're seeing what is happening through the eyes of people who live here on the ground. And the pressure is no longer limited to shipping lanes, oil terminals, or banks. Tehran is now directing part of its message towards the American political system itself, including the president's family. Ashlea. Now, that shift became very visible in a new Iranian broadcast about Barron Trump. Ashlea, Alex, please give us all the details.
It did. And this is a different kind of escalation because the purpose is not to hit a tanker or move money around sanctions. It's to make the conflict personal. Iranian state television aired a segment focused on Barron Trump, the 20-year-old son of President Donald Trump. The broadcast ran for roughly 3 minutes and presented graphics suggesting that people connected to Iran had studied his routine, his online presence, the people around him, and possible ways of approaching him. The program also referred to a $10 million reward connected to efforts against him. It showed stage diagrams of surveillance and social mapping, and it suggested that someone in Barron's wider social circle could be providing information. There's an important line between the threat and the evidence. No independent proof has been presented that Iranian operatives penetrated Secret Service protection, reached Barron, or placed an actual source close to him. The broadcast relied heavily on graphics and claims rather than verifiable operational evidence. But that does not make the broadcast irrelevant. Iran has previously issued threats directed at President Trump, members of his administration, and members of his family. A state television program that spends several minutes discussing the president's son is designed to create psychological pressure, even if its most dramatic claims cannot be verified. The timing is also significant. The Trump administration is trying to turn military pressure on Iran into economic isolation. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has described a new phase as an economic D-Day, and President Trump is warning governments and companies that helping Tehran could bring severe consequences. The new development is the Iranian response. Senior Iranian figures are increasingly describing the economic campaign as part of the war itself. Mohsen Rezai has warned that states participating in American economic pressure could be treated as parties to the conflict. Other voices close to Tehran's negotiating establishment have warned that another military round could come soon if countries cooperate with Washington. President Masoud Pezeshkian is speaking in a very different register. He has acknowledged that Iranian society is facing many problems and described the confrontation as a full-scale struggle across economic, military, and security fronts. His government is publicly talking about inflation, unemployment, household pressure, and the difficulty of protecting living standards. Another revealing admission concerns oil revenue. Iranian officials have acknowledged that some crude has to be sold quietly through intermediaries, with no certainty about when the money will actually reach the state. That means Tehran can move barrels and still face a cash flow problem because payment is delayed, discounted, or trapped outside the normal banking system. What stands out is the change in tone, not another slogan about resistance. Iranian governments have spent years telling the public that sanctions can be absorbed, bypassed, or turned into an opportunity for self-reliance. Now the president is admitting that the pressure is reaching ordinary life. The currency gives that admission a visible number. The free market rate has cost 2 million rials to $1, while the official rate remains far stronger and increasingly disconnected from what Iranians encounter outside the state system. A weak currency is not automatically a revolution, and economic pain is not the same as regime collapse. Iran has decades of experience with sanctions, informal trade, smuggling networks, and shifting the cost of crisis onto its own population. But the government is carrying the memory of recent cost of living protests as well. Economic grievances have repeatedly turned into political demonstrations in Iran, which means unemployment, food prices, and currency losses are security questions for the leadership, not merely economic statistics. The more revealing question is how much political risk the government believes it can carry at the same time. One answer is visible on the streets. For months, growing numbers of Iranian women have been appearing in public without the mandatory hijab. During the war, enforcement dropped as the state focused on military security and internal stability. Women without head coverings were even seen at events supporting the government and in state media. That created a problem for conservative clerics and politicians. They are now demanding renewed enforcement and accusing businesses of allowing violations. Some cafes and other establishments have reportedly been closed because they did not enforce the dress code. Direct confrontation is more complicated. Videos from Tehran and other cities show young women riding scooters while wearing helmets, but no head covering. Residents describe police and other authorities as far more hesitant to challenge women directly than they were before the 2022 protests that followed the death of Mahsa Amini. This should not be confused with an ideological conversion inside the Islamic Republic. The leadership has not suddenly abandoned the rules it spent decades enforcing. What has changed is the cost calculation. Closing a cafe is one thing. Sending morality police back into crowded streets to confront large numbers of women is another, especially while the government is already dealing with war, economic pressure, and public frustration. That creates an unusual picture inside Iran. The state is trying to show strength abroad while choosing its domestic confrontations more carefully at home. And there's another arena where Tehran can impose pressure without immediately risking a conventional military response: cyber operations. Hackers linked to the Iranian regime reportedly succeeded in shutting down a power station in Britain for 4 days. British officials have not identified the facility for security reasons. They say the plant was relatively small and its shutdown did not disrupt the country's overall electricity supply. The operational importance is not the size of the station. It's the fact that workers reportedly needed 4 days to restore it. If confirmed as an Iranian operation, that would represent a step beyond stealing documents or defacing websites. Interrupting the operation of an energy facility demonstrates that a cyber intrusion can have a physical effect even when the wider grid continues functioning. British authorities reportedly briefed power company executives after the incident and circulated new defensive guidance. The case was referred into the National Cybersecurity System connected to GCHQ. The warning environment was already serious. The head of Britain's National Cybersecurity Centre said earlier this summer that the agency had dealt with more than 200 attacks involving critical national infrastructure during the previous year. The United States has seen its own warning signs. A series of cyber incidents against water and wastewater systems affected facilities across 12 states last month. Some communities reported flooding, loss of water pressure, and temporary boil water instructions. The first reports emerged in Minnesota on July 26th, followed by incidents in states including Michigan, Georgia, South Dakota, and New Jersey. The FBI initially described the perpetrators in broad terms as malicious cyber actors. American officials later indicated that the threat was likely connected to Tehran. Cyber attribution is rarely as immediate as identifying the launch point of a missile. Investigators have to reconstruct access methods, infrastructure, malware behavior, and links between operators before governments can make a confident public judgment. Iran also benefits from that ambiguity. A cyber operation can create disruption, force governments to spend money, and make civilians feel vulnerable without automatically producing the same response as a ballistic missile strike. Similar Iran-linked activity has been reported across several European countries, including Germany, Poland, Finland, Belgium, and Albania. The pattern does not mean every intrusion comes from the same unit or carries the same strategic purpose. It does show how widely the cyber front can spread once a regional war begins touching infrastructure far from the battlefield. Put those two developments together, the threat to Barron Trump is psychological, while the power station incident is technical, but both are designed to create pressure beyond the conventional battlefield. Tehran is looking for pressure points that do not depend on winning a conventional military exchange. A threat against the president's family can generate fear and political attention. A cyber intrusion can force defensive measures and raise the cost of supporting Washington. Domestic propaganda can then present all of it as evidence that Iran still has options. At the same time, the regime has to manage a much more uncomfortable reality at home. The president is acknowledging economic strain, the currency is under pressure, and the state is hesitating over a confrontation with women who are openly ignoring one of the Islamic Republic's most symbolic rules. None of those developments prove that the regime is about to fall. Together, however, they explain why Tehran is trying to create leverage outside Iran while conserving political capital inside it. Mati, that brings us back to the physical contest in Hormuz. The next test is whether Iran tries to turn its blacklist into an actual seizure against a ship moving under American escort.
Thank you, our very own Ashlea Alex. Let's get back to the news. This is the point where the next phase becomes much more dangerous. Publishing a blacklist is easy. Enforcing detention or confiscation against a merchant ship moving inside an American protected corridor is entirely different. And to do that, Iran would need to place boats, boarding teams, or weapons close enough to an escorted vessel to compel it to stop. That puts IRGC forces much closer to US destroyers, aircraft, and helicopters already protecting the route. A confrontation that begins as an attempt to enforce an Iranian traffic order could become a direct naval engagement in minutes. And for now, Iran appears to be testing whether the threat of future punishment can achieve what mines and missiles are finding harder to do immediately. That's why the blacklist matters. It gives Tehran a way to pressure commercial decision makers without proving in real time that it can overpower an American escort. There's also a separate military reminder from Gaza that Israel is watching for reconstruction efforts even during a ceasefire. The IDF and Shin Bet struck in the El Maghazi area and killed Ismail Abu Ful, identified as a commander of the Hamas weapons production site. Israeli authorities say he was involved in manufacturing explosive devices and anti-tank missiles. The military says the production site had been established near an international aid distribution point. Israel presents the strike as part of an effort to stop Hamas from rebuilding military capability, while the Southern Command remains deployed under the current agreement. That operation is smaller than the naval contest in Hormuz, but the principle is familiar here in Israel. A ceasefire or reduced level of fighting does not remove the need to watch what an armed organization is rebuilding underneath it. Iran is now testing whether threats, cyber pressure, and selective maritime coercion can recover leverage that its physical blockade has begun to lose. If the next Iranian move requires seizing an escorted ship instead of warning one, how close is this contest to a direct US-Iran naval clash? So keep spreading the truth, follow us, and most importantly, don't forget to click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time, never miss boots on the ground. And by the way, if you've stayed this long, it means that you like our content. So come and see Yair and I also on our personal accounts. We're on Instagram, on TikTok, on X, on every possible platform, even on YouTube now. Come and drop a subscribe to see a little more than what you can find on YouTube or on broadcast. And as always, I want to challenge you to continue praying for the people of Israel. We are called to pray for Jerusalem. We are called to place watchmen on the walls to pray for the people of Israel. We are called to pray for our leadership, both President Trump in the United States and Netanyahu in Israel. And regardless of what you think politically, we are fighting a war against the evil of our time, the Iranian Ayatollah regime. And we need the Israeli army, the government of Israel, and the United States Army and government, all the prayer, all the support that we can possibly have internationally. This is, in the most pure essence, a war between good and evil, the forces of Judeo-Christian values and those of radical and evil Islam. And yes, it is evil, it is corrupting, it is destructive. Guys, if you're confused, you pray for God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven, and always remember to pray for the peace of the eternal city of Jerusalem. I'll see you all on the next broadcast. Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.